Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to this video where we continue to create our 3D Endless Runner in Unity. We will potentially release this game on mobile when we're done, but we have to take care of a lot of stuff first to make it to an actual game. In the last episode we took care of the road, so that we now can move through the level and the road gets respawned so that it's basically endless. In today's episode we will create ourselves some side content. We will make some plots or land pieces for besides the road, and we will spawn them randomly with some simple scripts. This will actually breathe a little bit of life into our level and fills the giant holes beside the road. I'm looking forward to this, so with not much further ado, let's get this going. So we are back in our Unity editor. What I want to do first is to create myself a plane for my side content plots. Now let's place it around and also play with the scale a little bit. I think I will make them also about 60 meters long. That seems like a reasonable size to me. And I also placed them just right above the road so that it looks like it's part of it. For the width I'm not completely sure right now. I just want to be it large enough so that you don't see the corners while running through the level. I just try 60 meters as well here. I also want to create a grass material, so let's open our materials folder and I just create a new material and I call it grass. Now I drag my grass material onto the plane and let's change the albedo color so that it's nice and juicy. Okay, looking good. So now let me duplicate this a few times and check out if that's enough. Alright, that looks fine for now, so I delete all but one of them really quick. I also want to create a new empty game object for the plane and drag it into it as some kind of a folder. And this will basically be the base for our prefab. Let's create a new subfolder inside our prefabs folder. I call it side content. Now again I just drag and drop my game object from the hierarchy into my project panel and this will create the prefab for me. Okay, now we are ready and set up to start coding. So let's create ourselves a new script. I call it plot spawner. And I just drag it onto my spawn manager in the hierarchy. Now let's open it up in Visual Studio and start coding. When planning this, we of course need to take the road into our consideration. We never want a road without a plot beside it. So since we start with one road beside the player, one behind him and 5 in front of him, I want to kind of initialize some plots right at the start. I guess we will go with 2 static ones, the one behind and the one right besides the player, so that we need to spawn 5 more right at the start of the game. I will now start to create some variables to control this, and if I maybe decide to change my opinion in the future, this will be handy. So let's create us first a private int and let's call it initAmount. And another private, this time a float, and I call it initStartZ. And just another one which will be our plot size, so private float plot size, and this will be 60 meters by default. Now we also need x coordinates, so I create 2 new variables for that. One is for the left one and for the right one. Alright. I also want to remember the last z coordinate where I placed stuff. This will all make sense, guys, just give me a minute. And finally we of course also need a list for our prefabs, so let's call it plots. Alright, so far so good. Now let's go back to Unity. First what we need to do is figure out our coordinates for the x values, so let's duplicate this plot. Oh, and I guess creating that empty game object and dragging the plane inside it just completely messed up my transform, so I need to take care and clean it up real quick. Alright, but now let's duplicate our plot and turn it on the y-axis, and now we can move it to the right. Okay, it looks like 38.25 meters for the right and minus that for the left side. Next I want to take care of the list we created for our prefabs, so I select our spawn manager, type 1 for now, and now I just drag my prefab from the project panel into the slot in the inspector. Okay, that should be it for us to start with. So let's go back to Visual Studio and start initializing our plots. What we now need to do first is to adjust our x coordinates. That was minus 38.25 for left and 38.25 for the right side. And I also used the start z position of our first plot for the init start z variable. Okay, now we can move on and write our start method. I just use a for loop that gets looped through the amount of times defined in our init amount variable. Now, next I want to pick up a random prefab from our list. Since we just have one at the moment, this is pointless, but it will become handy soon. So I just use random, range, start by 0, and I used the list count. You also might or might not know that if you generate an int value from this range method, the max parameter you hand is exclusive, so it's very handy for generating index values like in our case, so that we don't need to subtract 1 because of our first index is 0. Alright, so we use the generated number as an index to pick up our item from our list. Yeah, we also could do this in just one line, since it's not very difficult to read. Now, we actually need two prefabs, one for the left and one for the right side. Now let's just copy that real quick and adjust the variable names. Okay, now we are ready to instantiate the prefabs. Here I want to mention that this is not optimal when it comes to performance. We will later on change that to some kind of a pooling system when we refactor our code. But for now, and to get a running prototype up and running fast, it's perfectly fine. Let's create ourselves a temporary z position value, which is the last spawned z position plus the plot size. And now let's instantiate. As a game object, we need our plot left. Then we create a new vector. Use the xpos left as our x, 0.025 for the y, and our zpos for the z coordinate. And let's use the transform rotation of the prefab as the rotation. Alright, so now let's copy that one more time. I quickly change the variable names. And of course we need to rotate our second prefab by 180 degrees on the y-axis, so let's do that by new quaternion, and I just enter 180 on the y-coordinate. And last but not least, we need to add the plot size to our last zpos so that we know where the last spawn position was. Now that I think about it, I think we get rid of the init start z variable and we just use the variable for our last zpos. I think that makes more sense. So that was it for the start method, so let's head back to Unity and check out if our code works properly. Okay, and that looks just fine. But when you take a closer look, you see that the side plots actually didn't get respawned when we moved through the level. So let's take care of that next. First, let's move back to Visual Studio. And let's create ourselves a new method for our plot spawner. I call it Spawnplot. And I actually just take the content from our start method inside the for loop and move it through that method. And just call it from there. And that's basically it for our plot spawner. Now let's go back to our spawn manager, which we created in the last episode. First, we of course need a reference to our plot spawner, so let's create that real quick. And let's use the getComponent method to pull it. Alright, so final thing we need to do is just call our Spawnplot method in the spawn trigger entered method. Now let's just get back to Unity and check out if it works. So I'll start my game mode and let me see. See, our plots get spawned when we move through the level. And yep, it looks fine. Seems like we managed to get it up and running. Now, it's not a very juicy result yet since we only have that empty grass prefab. So I will quickly go ahead and create some more to breathe a little bit life into our level. I will speed this up for you guys. See you in a minute. Alright, so I created a few prefabs for our site content. What I need to do now is just to drag them into the plots list in the plot spawner component of our spawn manager, and we are good to go. Okay, let's now check out our today's results. I'm pretty happy with how it looks so far. Slowly but surely our endless runner finally comes to life. I hope you guys liked today's episode. Please leave a like, subscribe to stay updated, or leave a comment to share your feedback if you liked this video. Next time we will create and spawn some content for our road. See you in the next video. Bye bye.